Hello everyone. Let us discuss a topic on defining and calling functions, explaining how to define and call the functions in the Python, including the function names, parameters, and the return values. Introduction to defining and calling functions. Functions in Python are reusable blocks of codes that perform the specific task. Defining a function involves giving it a name and specifying the code it should execute. Calling a function means using its names to execute the code inside the function. Defining functions. To define a function, use the def keyword followed by the function name and the parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, you can specify the parameters that the function will accept. The code inside the function is indented and followed the colon at the end of the first line. Example of defining a function, def greet. This function is named greet and has no parameters. To define the function, use the def keyword followed by the function name and parenthesis. The code that will be executed when the function is called is indented below your second bullet and your third bullet. Calling functions. To call a function, simply use its name followed by the parenthesis. If the function has the parenthesis, provides the required arguments inside the parenthesis. The code inside the function will be executed whenever the function is called. Example of calling a function greet. This calls the greet function defined in the previous example. Since the function has no parameters, no arguments are needed inside the parenthesis. The code inside the function will be executed, which may include printing a greeting, your second bullet and your third bullet. Introduction to defining and calling functions. Functions in Python are usable block of codes that perform the specific task. Defining a function involves giving it a name and specifying the code it should execute. Calling a function means using its name to execute the code inside the function. Calling functions. To call the function, simply use its name followed by parentheses. If the function has parameters, provide the required arguments inside the parentheses. The code inside the function will be executed whenever the function is called. Example of calling a function greet. This calls the greet function defined in the previous example. Since the function has no parameters, no arguments are indented in the parentheses. The code inside the function will be executed, which may include the printing a greeting. Next, introduction to Python. Python is a high-level interpreted programming language. It is known for its simplicity and readability. Python is widely used for web development, scientific computing, and data analysis. Function basics. In Python, a function is a block of reusable code that performs a specific task. Function name should be descriptive and follow the lowercase and underscore naming convention. Parameters are the values that a function accepts as the input to perform its task. Function parameters. Parameters are defined within the parentheses of a function definition. Parentheses are like the placeholders for the actual values that will be passed to the function when it is called. Python supports positional keyword and default parameters for functions. Positional parameters. Positional parameters are defined by their position in the function call. The order of arguments passed during the function call must match the order of parameters in the function definition. Positional parameters are accessed within the function using their respective variable names. Keyword parameters. Keyword parameters are identified by their parameters names in the function call. The order of the arguments does not matter when using the keyword parameters. Keyword parameters are accessed within the function using their respective variable names. Default parameters. Default parameters have predefined values in the function definition. If an argument is not passed by a default parameter, the predefined value is used. Default parameters allow for optional arguments when calling a function. Return values. A return statement is used to specify the value that a function should return. Functions may return a single value or multiple values as a tuple. Return values can be stored in the variables or used directly in the expressions. Returning a single value. To return a single value, use the return statement followed by the value to be returned. The returned value can be accessed to a variable or used directly in other operations. A function stops executing once it encounters a return statement. Parameters recap. Parameters are the values that functions accept as inputs. They are defined within the parentheses of a function definition. Python supports positional, keyword, and default parameters for the functions. We come to the conclusion of this topic. Understanding function names, parameters, and return values is essential for effective Python programming. Proper naming and use of parameters enhance code readability and maintainability. Return values allows the functions to provide useful results to calling the function.